We're going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to, we have a couple people that we think are still joining, but we are going to start promptly and we will let everyone kind of join in as they can. And in that, I'm very slowly doing an introduction so that we can allow for people to come in to the Zoom. If you're here today with us, you are joining us for the APA California webinar, which is celebrating women in planning in California. I'm really excited to have you all join us today. It's a really beautiful spring day here in March, and I am based in Sacramento where allergy season is starting, and it's just the beginning of spring in that sense. So appreciate you all for joining us. My name is Allison Joe, and I am the Vice President of Diversity and Equity for APA California for the California chapter. I'm really honored to have you all join us and have us all hear a little bit about some of our history as planners, and particularly in California. One of the things that I'm most proud of in terms of being from California and working in the planning field is recognizing the value that every planner brings to the profession, as well as the planners that have come before us who have helped us get here. And I think one of the things that we've seen in the most recent months is that one, there's an absolute need for to recognize and honor not just planners, but also public servants and people who do things on behalf of the public, do things in ways that are supportive of broad communities and think about things like diversity, equity, and inclusion with intention and with thoughtfulness and in ways that improve our communities for the better. And I'm really proud to be here with you all and to be kind of help kick off this conversation today in honor of Women's History Month, but also not necessarily just because it's Women's History Month. So today I am going to just introduce the session, and I'm going to have my three panelists really provide a little bit more background on themselves and on this work. So I am really pleased to introduce David Kwong, who is the APA California historian in his volunteer role, but in his professional role is the community development director of the city of Rancho Cordova. I'm going to have David introduce our speakers and our panelists. What I do want to do is just some quick housekeeping and reminders before I do that and hand off. So this is a webinar. It is being recorded for AICP, or it's being recorded. It will be posted on the APA website, and this is we're pending final posting, but it will receive AICP credit of 1 credit and 1 credit for equity, and that will be available. If you have questions, please enter them in the Q&A section, and we will go through those as they can. If you need to address something directly, the chat is available, but discouraged because we're trying to focus on the presentation. And but if there's technical difficulties or any questions, please feel free to reach out to me via the chat. And we will make these slides available to the registered attendees after the webinar. And the recording of the webinar as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce David. And if there's anything else, I think we will have it covered today. I'm really excited to see you all here, and thank you all for being here. David.
Great. Thank you, Allison. David Kwong. I am the state historian for the chapter. And actually, I'm very pleased and honored to be able to introduce two wonderful women who are going to continue furthering our DEI efforts statewide. This is really a great replay of the Betty Croly Memorial Lecture by Libby Tyler. You're going to hear from her in a few minutes here. Just want to spend a minute or two first talking about one of the women who really helped push everything forward, furthering everybody's efforts and moving the profession forward. And that's Marie Elizabeth or Betty Croly, who was a pioneer female leader in California planning community. She came to Northern California in 1944 and really began a distinguished career in planning. She contributed through multiple planning roles. She was a founding chapter historian, basically helping us set standards to follow. She retired as the assistant director of planning in Alameda County. Actually also served in the California chapter of the American Institute of Planners prior to the merger in 1948 between the California Planners Institute and the American Institute of Planners. Betty rose to prominence in the California chapter, where she served as the newsletter editor, the vice president for professional development, and other roles before being elected to the National APA Board of Directors. In the 80s, she helped establish Planning History Awards at the National APA, which continues to this day. And in 1988, became the chapter's first official chapter historian, as I mentioned just earlier. And she performed that for a number of years. It really was through Betty's efforts and also our late historians, late Frank Wine, Larry Mateer, and of course Steve Preston, who's very active still, that the chapter was able to open its archives in the special collection archives at California State University Northridge. So really through Betty's efforts and a number of other people were we able to establish those archives in Northridge. So with that, I'm going to introduce two wonderful women who are helping further all our DIA efforts. First is Rachel Rayner Hollander, AICP. She's a senior planner with the RRM Design Group. She's based in Santa Barbara. Rachel specializes in private entitlement projects and long-range planning efforts, and she applies state legislation to expedite and streamline processes. She's passionate about understanding and advocating for the legislative changes in the south coast of Santa Barbara's permitting environment. Rachel is a Cal Poly SLO city and regional planning alumni, and when she's not doing planning work, she can be found outdoors. She was previously the section director in 2019 to 2023 and is currently the sponsorship officer. And then we have, of course, Elizabeth Libby Tyler, PhD. I call her Dr. Tyler a lot. She's also a fellow AICP and is the community development director for the city of San Pablo, where she oversees programs in planning, zoning, building services, and residential health and safety. Dr. Tyler has over 40 years of experience as a planner. She's a charter member of the APA and was also the first woman planner in the state of Illinois to be recognized as a fellow of the American Institute of Certified Planners. In 2020, Dr. Tyler received a Dale Prize from Cal Poly Pomona for her contributions to women in planning, and she currently serves as the director of the Northern Section and is also the chair of the APA's National Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. So with that, I'd like to transition it over to, I think, Rachel.
Oh, I'm gonna hand it over to Libby, but thank you for the great introduction, David. While I do have the floor, the one thing that I would love to see in the chat is anything that the audience has done in terms of participation in events or programs this month. And it could be something less informal too. Maybe it's a happy hour at work that you've planned to really honor and celebrate Women's History Month. So I'll put that prompt in the chat, but the one item that I would love to see how folks have celebrated this particular month. And with that, Libby, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind introductions, and happy Women's History Month. I mean, I know we're almost to the end of March, but there's been a lot going on, and we still have a few more days left. And I'm just so thrilled that Allison had the idea to carry forward this lecture that we had in Riverside as part of the Betty Croly series and bring it to a webinar audience in March. So I really appreciate the effort. And I have some slides that I'm going to go through to frame this. And let's see, make sure everybody can see this well. And what I'm going to do is talk about, I've been a planner for a little while, over 40 years and counting. I started really young, right? And and I think that when you've been doing something for a long time, actually we're all part of history, right? And when you've been doing something like planning for a while, you actually begin to have lived history, and you begin to see trends and changes, and you begin to notice people, and you begin to notice people who influence you, whether you knew it at the time or not. So I want to talk about my lived history of planning, and specifically my lived history of planning and women leaders in California. And then building off of some of the information in the archives that David mentioned, I want to talk about some of our women planning pioneers in California. And then I have a lot of women leaders just in the last 50 years, so recent history, who have been planning leaders, very influential leaders. I want to recognize them and talk about them. And then I want to end up with just some things that are available now for women in planning and for folks who want to elevate and support women in the profession. So that's what I'm going to be working on in the next few slides. So let's get started with my life experience. So here, this is sort of a timeline for me. I was, how you kind of target when you grow up. What are your influential decades? And for me, it's the 1960s and the 1970s. I was a child in the 1960s, and I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut. And for those of you who are planning history buffs and redevelopment buffs, New Haven, along with New York and other cities in the Northeast, really grabbed onto the whole concept of redevelopment, classic redevelopment. This is when, you can see in the photos coming up, this is when whole neighborhoods might be wiped out in the interest of cleaned up neighborhoods, new public housing, new interstates. So there was really a belief in redevelopment being something as part of the Great Society that Lyndon Johnson talked about. Also, in the early 70s, there was just the beginning of the awareness of environmental concerns. Back then, we talked about it being the ecology. So I remember being a school kid and learning about, our river in New Haven's polluted. What are we going to do about it? And what are we going to do about our daily lives, and how are we going to save the ecology? That was very influential. When we're young, things really make a mark on you, and I think that awareness of the ecology really set me forward in wanting to study the environment and environmental planning, and ultimately city planning. In 1975 to 80, I was in college. I moved to the anti-New Haven, which is Boulder, Colorado. Very different. It didn't have the same kind of urban issues that New Haven had, but it had a lot of environmental issues. And I was in a wonderful program in the geography department, and I learned about planning only later in the program there. I was in environmental conservation and doing cartography and this type of thing, but not very good at it. And the awareness was, gee, how am I going to get a job as a cartographer? Probably not too many jobs, and I'm really not doing as well as some of the other people in the class. And then I learned about this whole field called urban planning. And it's funny because I really knew about urban planning, but I didn't know what it was. And it just clicked, and I thought, gee, this is something where I can, my passion for the outdoors, what's happening in cities, I can really make this a career. It was wonderful. I was a real planning groupie in my later undergraduate years. And, for fun, we would go to public hearings. It was just like, oh, gee, it's like going to the concert, going to a public hearing. Then later on, moved to California to go to Berkeley, got my master's in environmental planning and landscape architecture at UC Berkeley. I met my husband, Rob Olshansky, who's also a planner. He was in the city planning department, and I got my first job in San Francisco preparing environmental impact reports. So CEQA, yay, full employment. And this was the 1980s. A lot was going on. It really was a boom era. And, if you look at old movies, you'll see everything's big eyeglasses, big hair, big shoulders, big and a lot of development in San Francisco. And even to the point where there were limitations on how many high rises they would allow each year. That was very interesting. And I'm going to talk about my boss, my first boss, who was very influential for me. And I have her profiled a little later on. I mentioned I met my husband at Cal. Well, he stayed on to get his PhD and became a planning educator. And we moved to the Midwest, back to Urbana, Illinois. And we were there for a long time, 28 years. And this is where I went back to school and got a PhD in environmental psychology, which was a passion that started in Berkeley. And then I had the wonderful opportunity to teach undergraduate students at the University of Illinois in planning. I taught there for 11 years and local planning and all the skills they would need. And then I was a community development director, which was really my ultimate job, I feel, for the city of Urbana. Very busy there, did a lot of different things. It was a wonderful opportunity. And then back not too many years ago in 2018, my husband retired and we just wanted to come back to our old neighborhood in Berkeley, and we got as close as we could. And I've been started out working with contract planning, but first thing I did was to go to the northern section of the California chapter and volunteer to do some things. I'm still very involved with the section and now the chapter as well. And then about 2020, I was a contractor for the city of San Pablo, but I came back onto civil service as, guess what, community development director. So here's some images. There's my dad on the upper left. He passed away many years ago, 1976. And he was a chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals in New Haven. And this was a very influential position in the mid-60s. And controversial too, because he was a Republican who was appointed by a Democratic mayor. And the Republicans did not like that. And then here's just a picture of what was happening in New Haven and the mayor that he worked for, and just that era of 1960s planning, men in suits with tall buildings, right? That was going to be the future. Here's me growing up a little bit, just some of the few childhood pictures. I'm the youngest of a large family of 6 children. And I think that's the only picture that exists of all 6 of us. We were out in Colorado on a vacation. And I love the picture in the middle. That's me and my girlfriends in a hippie school in high school. It's called the Unschool in New Haven. And there's a beautiful big old house that I grew up in. Some of the things that really influenced me as a young woman were the Girl Scouts. I love the Girl Scouts, and I think they're still phenomenal for women young girls and women to learn leadership skills and self-sufficiency. And then I was also a beneficiary of kind of the second wave feminism. And I used to have this pin, sisterhood is powerful. So even when I was 12, 13 years old, my consciousness was raised. I was a feminist. And here I am as a young planner in Boulder County at the drafting table doing the not very good maps. And there I am in graduate school doing field work with some colleagues. And then on the right, many years later, community development director, city of Urbana I have my heads tilted. I'm listening to the commissioners and listening to people on the commission and people in the public. And on the lower right, scene of something we're all familiar with as planners is going out to the neighborhoods, meeting in the school gym, and just talking about the issues and what we're going to do about them. Right now, I'm in city of San Pablo, a small city in the East Bay. It's a wonderful city. It's like an enclave, and I get to work with some of the most amazing planners and building technicians you could ever find. And we won for one of the projects an award from the northern section. So you can see some of my comrades there, my colleagues doing more outreach for one of our plans. And then we just have a great time. We're really into like theme lunches and holidays there. So that was our Halloween Barbie celebration from last year. What did I observe in all of this? Well, one observation, there were so few female role models growing up. So few. I can think of one really only one teacher in high school, a woman who was just brilliant and so smart. And she noticed me a little bit, but I just thought she didn't even need to notice me. She was a great role model. In college, very few female professors. I'm only thinking of one, a sociology professor. All the others were men. And, men are great role models too, but I really wanted to see the women. And then I remember when my first job was with Boulder County, there was one female planner in the planning department. And I remember talking to my friends, there's a woman in the planning department. Let's go meet her. Let's talk to her. And similarly, I was in public works in the engineering, there was a woman, one woman engineer. So it's changed. I know it's changed, but that's the background. And it hasn't changed too much. And as the higher up you go, fewer and fewer women you'll find. When I moved to San Francisco and I looked for my work and wound up working a lot in CEQA, I found a firm that was just a niche firm, female-owned firm in San Francisco. And I think that explosion of planning legislation and environmental legislation opened up opportunities for women that hadn't been there before. So we began to see a lot of women-owned firms. We began to see an ascendance of women into being planners for communities, but it took a while. And always there's been the dynamic of being a female manager in a male-dominated firm. And many of my jobs, I've been like the only professional woman there. Even still, I'm the only female department head. I was the only female department head in Urbana as well. So that continues, and there is a dynamic. We can see that all the time. There's just different communication styles and different ways of approaching things. So very used to being the only woman in the executive room. But it's important to learn from the role models, to extend it forward, and to celebrate our leaders, which is what we're doing today. So where can you find out about women in planning? This great archive at CSUN that David talked about, and that Betty Croly, who started this. And here's just some connections, places delving in for the information for the women I want to celebrate today. These are some of the resources, and I really want to say hats off to David for the excellent work he does as our historian, Steve Preston, and the late, great Larry Mentier. So thank you all for your work. And let's just start with the planning pioneers. 1934, this is a California Planners Institute, which would be the forerunner of APA California. And here's a meeting. They're in Del Monte, Monterey. We're going to be in Monterey again coming up in September, right, for the annual conference. And what do you notice about this picture? Well, I noticed they're all men, and I think they're all white men, and they look pretty buttoned up, right? So this was the face of planning about 90 years ago. It's changed, hasn't it? Looks a little different. So who was around in terms of the women? Who was around during that time? Who was providing some balance? And I think this woman, I really want to shout out to Catherine Bauer Worcester, who was really there in the room way back. She was recognized in 1937, just a few years later, with President Roosevelt at the time signing the United States Housing Act. And she was a housing authority and worked in that housing authority and was really right there, right in the beginning, in part of the New Deal when we were rebuilding after the Depression. So this is a very significant figure, and became known for her expertise in social questions and housing and community planning. Was an essay that she wrote back in 1951. She was recognized as a national planning pioneer in 1988. Now, I said I went to Cal Berkeley, so that's in Worcester Hall. And I thought, well, gee, is that named out after Catherine? Well, it turns out only in 2020 was Worcester Hall renamed, so it wasn't just named after William Worcester, but also Catherine Worcester. So she is recognized with our great brutalist monument to planning, Worcester Hall on the Berkeley campus. Here is another project that Catherine Bauer was involved in, and it's the Telesis Space for Living exhibit. This is very woo-woo. I find it very exciting. It's 1939, so this was very, very advanced, very forward, and she was working with a really interesting group of planners: T.J. Kent, Corwin Mosine, William Spangle. And I know that T.J. Kent was still coming to the Cal campus, talking about planning history when I was there as a student. Corwin Mosine was founder of one of the prominent planning firms in the Bay Area, and William Spangle, similarly prominent as really a father of hazards planning. And he had a company on the peninsula. But I just love like the forward-looking, the really cool modern design of this exhibit. So that's a shout out for other things. In my research, here's another prominent planner, mostly an architect, and she's a Black woman. So one of the few persons of color who was involved in planning and recognized for it. And she was the first Black woman to earn a license to practice architecture. And she was in New York and California. And she focused primarily on socially responsible and sustainable architecture. Now, do you know from LAX, I think it's Terminal 1, there's that spaceship landing. I mean, it's iconic. She was involved in that design. So that's pretty major. And this was a great little hub spot that I found on the internet to recognize Norma Merrick-Sklarick. Some other folks that get called out for being involved in predecessor to APA, the CCAIP. Mary Robinson Gilkey was the first female to serve as an officer, but then it took 30 more years to have the first female president of APA, and that was until the late 70s. And then here we have another planner, Marilyn Prey, who was also an officer in the CCAIP. So this also is from the CSUN exhibit. Some more folks, Minnie Ruth, she had a planning firm with her husband in Berkeley, and she was involved in the California chapter's first regular office holder, and that was back in 1961. And she got on the board in 1948. So very early on, first one to hold office, and then elected to the board in 1961. There's Betty Croly, whom David talked about. So there she is. She established the California Archives. She came to California in the 1940s and rose to prominence as assistant director for planning for Alameda County. She was also on the National APA board, the chapter board, and she was the chapter's first appointed historian, and she served in that role for 25 years. So some observations from our pioneers: very few women before 1970. These were the ones I found. And then back then, it wasn't so much that they were professional planners, but they were civic leaders, they were activists, they were philanthropists, do-gooders, secretaries, maybe administrative, but not necessarily in the planning profession. And then, as I noted, I think that there was more opportunities for women with the environmental laws and the planning and housing laws that came about primarily in the 1970s, along with what we used to call the women's lib movement. And then more opportunities still in the 1980s with the economic growth. I have some additional women leaders I'd like to celebrate. Many of these I know, many of them touched me in my career, my life. And I hope that you'll see others that you know. Some are still, many are still with us. And I just want to quickly celebrate these women. They're in 4 different kind of categories. There's the academy, of course, where we learn planning. There's government, a big part of planning practice. There's private sector, folks who founded firms and have done great work in private firms. And then catch-all of nonprofit and advocacy. So I just have a handful for each, and I just want to, run through these, and I have sincere apologies for any omissions, and I'm sure you have your own, gallery of heroines and heroes that you would like to celebrate, but these were mine. And here's starting with the Academy, Margarita Pio McCoy, FAICP, and the first woman appointed to full professorship at a major university, and the first woman to chair a planning department in the United States. So this was Margarita, and primarily her career was at Cal Poly Pomona, although she also taught at USC, where she received her PhD. And she was also active in APA. She served on the AICP Commission. She helped to found the Planning and Women Division. I'll talk about them in a minute. And she was designated a National Planning Pioneer in 2018. So, Margarita. Judith Ennis. Judith Ennis, I knew at Berkeley, but she was primarily a mentor for my husband, who was in city planning. And we lost Judy just about 4 or 5 years ago. She was very well known for collaborative approaches to urban planning and decision making. And she wrote a fantastic book, Planning with Complexity. And this was about collaborative rationality for public policy that she published with David Boer. She was active on the Planning Accreditation Board and also with the ACSP, which is the Association of Collegiate Schools of Planning. And at UC Berkeley, she served as the director of the Institute of Urban and Regional Development, which has done a lot of research and work in the field of city planning. That's Judy. Claire Cooper Marcus was, I mentioned like there's always like one female professor. Well, she was my one female professor at Cal, and I really loved what she taught about, and it really influenced me in my further studies and really how I approach planning, where she was all about environmental psychology and studying the impact of landscapes, through the lifespan, and healing landscapes and the social and psychological implications of design, particularly urban, open space, affordable housing, healthcare, and environments for children and the elderly. So she really picked up where Holly White kind of left off, William H. White from Pennsylvania, and she was just such a powerful leader in this field that I think is so important for our practice of planning, whether you're working in natural landscapes or urban landscapes. So, hail to Claire. Linda Dalton, still very, very active, working on a committee with her for FAICP. She's helping the chapter there. Linda, a longtime academic at Cal Poly SLO, and currently Emerita professor of city and regional planning, and has been very involved in leadership and planning education, has been involved with JAPA, Journal of the APA, and the Journal of Planning, Education, and Research. So 2 primary places where we write about planning, practice, and research, and also, a member of the California Planning Roundtable, which many of these women are. So Linda, Juliana, I got to know Juliana when I went to a visit at Cal Poly Pomona. Also super influential academic and involved in some environmental planning with the California Center for Land and Water Stewardship, and also the president of the Southern California Planning Congress. So Juliana is a wonderful female faculty member at Cal Poly Pomona, and a recent fellow, elevated to fellow for AICP. Another new fellow from UC San Diego, Sue Pearson, and Sue teaches at San Diego's Urban Studies and Planning Department. She's involved in place-based design and community engagement, and she's also a planning commissioner in San Diego. So that's Sue. Let's talk about the public sector. Marge Macris. I think she might be maybe the most influential of all these fantastic women. I looked at her when I came to Berkeley. She was had been a longtime planning director for Marin County, and then was working for the city of Berkeley, and she was just legendary. At the time, she also was part of a power couple with Dean Macris, who was planning director of San Francisco. But I was really interested in Marge, and I just loved her no-nonsense approach, her pragmatism, and just that she was there as a planning director of these very important agencies, And she was also a founder of the Planning Women Division back in 1979. March hired me to work for the city of Berkeley, and I was just, I could almost not talk to her. I was just so humbled by what a wonderful leader she was and how influential. So I really revere her. And here she is in front of Marin County, and she passed away just a few years ago. Vivian Kahn, another wonderful woman I met in Berkeley. And Vivian has been really an expert in zoning and planning and was a long time with the OPR, what used to be known as OPR. Also worked for the city of Berkeley and for many years as a consultant with Dighton Bhatia. And here I am with Afsha Hamid, who's now at Santa Clara. And this is at the conference in Fresno. So Vivian. Elaine. I think a lot of you know Elaine because she teaches classes and almost every national conference. And she's so involved with the California Roundtable, and she is a fantastic mentor. She was a client of mine when I was doing environmental consulting, and she was community development director for Belmont at the time, and she had little children. And she was a one woman I knew who was a community development director or planning director who had little kids and was still doing it. And how do you do that? And she told me what it was like. And it was just amazing to have someone who was not too many more years advanced, but enough for me to really envision, yes, you can do this. And here's some of the techniques that you can use. So hats off to Elaine, and very, very involved in the Leadership Academy, which I think is a great resource for planners who are wanting to learn more about being leaders. And that's run by the California Planning Roundtable. Linda Tatum. I worked with Linda on the FAICP committee and really love working with her and love, again, one of the few Black women planners of prominence. We're getting more and more, but hats off to Linda. Very recently retired from the city of Long Beach, where she was assistant city manager and has also taught at Cal State Fullerton. Was a longtime president for the California Planning Foundation, and has been involved with the APA Foundation and the Planning Accreditation Board. Janet Ruggiero. I know this is a woman who's been very influential for planners and has a long history as a community development director, received the Distinguished Service Award, and is currently involved with the De La Salle Institute. Carol Barrett, somebody who has done so much, also did a stint at Berkeley, and is somebody who's been very involved with the Roundtable, the foundation, and also with ethics training for AICP and for planners. Here's an up and coming, just our last director for the California chapter, Andrea Aus, and an indigenous heritage, and currently the community development director for the city of West Sacramento. And there's a nice quote here from her bio, and I just love her approach and love working with her, and I want to celebrate Andrea. Okay, private sector. Jeanette Dinwiddie-Moore, very, very prominent, and she's from a different type of planning, the construction end, and an amazing leader in construction and planning. She was the winner of the AICP President's Award in 2023, been very involved in the chapter, the Roundtable, and the super important division of the planning and Black community, and has been a real advocate at the national level, APA national level, to elevate our EDI efforts. And she's been working on the Diversity Summit for many, many years, and just really always been a leader there, and been involved in the membership inclusion plan. We need these efforts now more than ever. This is my first boss in the private sector, Gloria Root. We lost her a while back, but I really looked up to Gloria for her brilliance. And because she started her own firm and she melded the worlds of architecture and design with environmental planning. And she had just such a refreshing approach. And then later on, she worked for architecture firms, but also she did just civic advocacy with Spur and other organizations. And, it's like here's where you feel like you're really history. I worked there. It was a very important firm at the time, but you're not going to find a footprint on the internet for this, because this is all prior to internet. Back when we would do cut and paste. And anyway, this is to Gloria. And for those who had the fortune of knowing her, she was a dynamo, larger than life. Some other women I worked with as an environmental planning consultant, Roberta Mundy. And we lost Roberta just a few years ago. She was I just think of her as a gentlewoman, and she did wonderful work in environmental planning, but also economics and land use, and worked on some really important projects and plans, and was similarly involved in the roundtable. And our last woman I'd like to celebrate was so kind to me and so generous as another planning consultant when I was working as an independent consultant, and really, again, just an outstanding supporter, real expert in CEQA, and became retired, sold her company, and then just got involved in environmental issues in Marin. And she passed away just a few years ago as well. Final category of planning advocates, I want to hats off to Sylvia McLaughlin and the other women who created the wonderful parks and the wonderful things that BCDC does to preserve the Bay Area. And here's another woman I had direct contact with, Dorothy Walker. And Dorothy is very important historically. She was a zoning advocate. She was a president of ASPO, which was a predecessor organization to APA. And this was in the late 1970s. And she was APA's first president and its first female president back in the late 70s. So she had a huge footprint. And I worked with Dorothy when she was working for the university. I was hired by the city of Berkeley to work on city university issues. And the university paid for my salary, but I worked for the city. And one of the great compliments Dorothy paid me was when she said, gee, Libby, we paid for you and you're just doing what the city wants. And I said, that's right. That's my job. So she also, we lost a few years ago, and I would just encourage you to find out more about what Dorothy did during her career and some of her really pioneering stances in protecting housing and looking at being critical of some of the single purpose zoning that was happening at the time. True pioneer. And then finally, hats off to Helen Burke. I met her at grad school at Berkeley, and she went back to school late in life just to learn more about her passion for environmental planning. She was the only woman and the only environmentalist on the East Bay Mud Board. That's our utility district. And so she's somebody I want to give a hats off for fighting the good fight for the environment. And now I want to talk about what are the organizations that are out there that can help to elevate and celebrate women? And, if you're starting out in your career, what are the good places you can go to for support? So right off the bat, I've got to talk about the Women in Planning Division. And I love this little tagline, smashing glass ceilings since 1979. So this is a division of APA. It's very inexpensive to join a division. If you're a student, you get like 5 of them for free. So, jump on board. These are the programs that they're having. I think most of these were just this month. So they're very active and they do really cool stuff, very interesting programs and all kinds of things, a book club, a webinar, in-person meetup, you name it. And so last year, Minneapolis, they did a program with the Girl Scouts, and this is to really work with girls to show them how they can become planners and what is city planning. And in Minneapolis, they actually had a badge for planning for the Girl Scouts, and I got to do the day of service. And I just love working with young girls. I have 2 boys, grown sons, and now I have 2 grandsons. But I love working with girls too. Women's Transportation Seminar. If you're in transportation, this is a stalwart group. It's been around for a long time, very, very prominent, and they serve people in all types of transportation, not just planning, but also, bus drivers and traffic engineers, you name it. And so I commend them. I mentioned the California Planning Roundtable and the Leadership Academy. So for women, anybody looking at promoting their career, I do recommend the Leadership Academy. And so what can we do to recognize women leaders? Well, get involved in the Timeline Project. David can tell you more about that, or other local history projects. Attend, as I mentioned, look at attending or recommending people in your organization or your friends to attend the Leadership Academy. Join the mentorship program. We have one in the northern section. I'm sure there's others. I know they even have a little mentorship program for NPC coming up this weekend. Write about what interests you. Get your name out there. If you have an opinion, you have thoughts, now more than ever, please write them down. And there's APA planning is always interested, or the divisions, or your section, or your chapter. They're always looking for content. A volunteer. So one of the first things I did when I moved to California is I volunteered to do ethics training for the section. And then lo and behold, I got to know really hundreds of planners as a result. And I've continued to provide volunteer service to the section. And I continue to volunteer at the national level as well. I was the chair of the Planning and Women Division because somebody asked me to run. I hadn't been that involved before. I ran and I won, and I became involved in planning leadership at the national level. It was amazing. And these divisions are a great avenue for leadership, as are the chapters and the sections. So I really, really recommend that. I would like to see more of the efforts of Planning and Women have done a lot of work on seeking equity in FAICP, as have the other population divisions. When I became FAICP in 2008, there were only 10% women and very few persons of color. That's changing, but it takes a concerted effort. And then finally, mentor. If you had a mentor, thank them, recognize them. A teacher, one of those people that influenced you, and maybe you never even spoke to them, but wouldn't that be a lovely thing to reach out to them and thank them and let them know, hey, you influenced me just by being there. So mentorship program, submit awards, nominate people for awards. It could be a project or it could be an individual. Here's Carlina, who I work with on the northern section, and we recognized her last year as an emerging planner. She's got her master's since and now working as an environmental planner. And here's a 2024 College of Fellows. It is looking like a more varied group, a more diverse group. So it's wonderful to recognize our prominent planners, and I love to help to mentor folks as they get into the FAICP process. It's very difficult, but it's my pleasure to help people get through that. And I used to have a really high batting average, but it's gotten a little harder lately. And then finally, some more things that we can do for the next generation to be mentors, to support students. If there's a planning program, go see their presentations, or have them come into your office as interns, and support the people in your office. The young planners, your sisters and other young emerging planners. Give them a break, help them out. And if you're ever asked, oh gee, can you come in and do a lecture? Yes, of course. Any chance. I'd love to go back and see students, whether they're in high school, grade school, college, and grad school. Support the organizations I've mentioned, again, the leadership roles, and even beyond APA. What about, and beyond your professional planning bubble, what about helping out with your PTA or organizations, environmental groups, civic groups? They're all over the place, and they need our leadership and our skills. Planners are really good at this stuff. So, spread it around, and it just all gives back. The giving all comes back, and we know that. Okay, so what are you going to do? Well, here's from one of the people most often quoted, I feel, Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that's how I felt about some of the women I was able to profile today. So now this is my contact information, and I know we have maybe some questions coming up, and I know Rachel has some questions she'd like to ask. So I think we'll, let's see.
Thank you so much, Libby. Maybe put your contact information in the chat too for folks.
Okay, get out of the share. There
All
we go.
good. Thank you very much. I'm feeling very inspired. Libby did a dry run for us on Friday afternoon, and I just am feeling the same, emotions that I was feeling on Friday when we were talking and kind of collaborating on what questions we wanted to, really discuss during this remaining time that we have left. I just want to say I can attest, while I kind of close this out, or kind of lead off with the initial question. If folks have questions that you want to put in the Q&A, please do so. And we can try and get those answered with our remaining time. But I just wanted to say that I can attest to how we put into practice some of what Libby shared with us today about what we learned about the various kind of categories of women that she grouped in today's presentation. I was a Girl Scout. I felt like that set me up for success. I've been very involved in our local Central Coast Section Board. As David mentioned, I was the director. I'm the current sponsorship officer. But I started as a student rep on our board, working my way up to that director level position. And we like to say at the Central Coast section, but I think it applies for any section of the 8 sections in California chapter APA, that reach out to your section representatives on the local board. And if you have an idea you're passionate about doing outreach at a local school, whether that's elementary school, middle school, high school, college, we've been talking about doing that at a lot at the Central Coast section board of, really kind of building up that succession of planners, as Libby was describing. And so I think, and that applies to any ideas that you have. We've had people say, I would love to do a walking tour of this really cool project. And then, as an APA section board, we try and really make that happen. So I also just want to say that I, find the informal ways to, whether mentors at work, or just kind of in your professional network, those have been a lot of the people that have been so monumental in my almost 10-year planning career. So just want to encourage you to reach out, because people are usually willing to respond. So my first question for Libby is kind of building off one of those last couple slides that you shared with us of, you shared a couple ideas of how we can really kind of get ourselves involved, put ourselves out there beyond our normal day jobs or education, and kind of get involved in additional organizations as it relates to APA, potential just individual organizations that are maybe particular to our stage of life that we're in. You said PTA or maybe Girl Scouts. Are there any kind of tips or tricks that us as current planning professionals we can utilize in our career to help foster that diversity and, really build up that pipeline of planners?
Yeah, I think there are. And I just think that we need to, I mean, it's not going to be little by little, you're going to see these opportunities. So it could be, maybe you're going to do a hiring decision. And you might think about posting that position in different locations, different universities, colleges, community colleges. Um, so that's one way to get the word out. And again, maybe there's internships and perhaps those become available to not, the same place all the time, but maybe other schools, other parts of your community, so that you can really reach people who wouldn't traditionally have a chance to learn about planning or work in planning. And I think another thing is really looking at within the workplace, if you are, if you're in a position where you can be influential, how about promoting people up? We have, in San Paulo, we have a great tradition in my department of people working through the ranks and using the educational program that the city has to go back to school and maybe become a planner or a building official. And we have one planner who's now AICP, but started out as a clerical when she was a teenager here, and used the educational program to get her bachelor's, then her master's, bought a house, got married, and is now, very advanced in the planning field. So I think it's that support, looking for those opportunities, and again, it's just little by little, you can just nudge it a bit, and you can really elevate people. Mentorship programs are great, and I know we have planning mentorship, but a lot of communities have broader mentorship programs through the school districts. So you might be able to mentor a young person. I was able to do that in Urbana through middle school and high school, and it's very gratifying, and you can make a big difference. So those are some examples I would use.
Those are great examples. One of my next questions, and we'll see if we have time for one more, but if not, then that's okay too. I was really curious about your experience. You described that you were one of the few women in the room when you were starting out your planning career, and sometimes still even to this day are. Um, can you describe maybe your experience and like your feelings, like, and how you worked through some of those situations um, being the only woman in the room, and if there was any difficult situations that you had to overcome?
Yeah, there were. There were, and and to some extent, sometimes there still are. And I guess, yeah, I'm sensitive to it too. That's one of my characteristics. But I kind of get mad, and it's not. So I do. It's controlled anger though, but it actually motivates me, and um, and I'm also kind of bad at dissimulation. I kind of like have to tell the truth. So I pretty much express myself, speaking the truth, even if it can be a little difficult. And so at least I've remained true to myself. And it helps to recognize. And again, when you're wounded that way, when you see so many other people, men and women, have gone through the same thing, then, then maybe we learn that we won't do that to other people. Perhaps that we might be a little more considerate or sympathetic. And so those are the positives, that you use the anger, keep the self-awareness, and I think just sort of head down or making excuses. I don't think that really helps in the long run. But we're all different people, and we can't be who we're not. And I think what really helps is to kind of know who we are. And at least I've always had that. I've kind of, faults and all, I know who I am, and that's helped me. And also remember, these negative things can be much more powerful than the positive things, but we shouldn't let that be. We need to remember all the wonderful things people have done to help us, and to support us and to support others, and provide the comradeship and the collegiality. And there's so much more of that than the isolated time when you're maybe disrespected, or there's a wrongdoing of some sort. But yeah, motivation.
Super well said, Libby. There was one memory I recounted as we were putting this together, and I was pretty young in my planning career pre-pandemic, and I remember one of my female bosses in planning, it was her and I, and we were the only women in the room with full of men. And she just did something so simple of she like turned her chair to like create more space for my chair at the table. And like we didn't ever say anything about it, but I just remember so clearly that it was just, she was making space for that to happen, even if not, directly with using language and doing so. And so I just feel like that's been how I've moved forward to create that additional space for whoever it is, whether it's, you know, younger planning professionals that now I'm mentoring. So I just, you know, I think that's well said on your part, and I just triggered that little memory.
That's
Well, I
great.
know we're at time. I can't thank you, Libby, enough for putting together those slides originally for the Riverside Conference and then repurposing them, adding to them for today's presentation to really memorialize this lecture series and get it recorded on APA's virtual library, which I'm really excited about doing. So I'll hand it back to either David or Allison to maybe more formally close us out.
I'm happy to just close it out really quickly. Just virtual applause and thank yous to David and Rachel and Libby. Really appreciate your willingness to share and really let us all rediscover some of the things that we had in our back, in the back of our minds. We know that there are people who have come before us. We often don't take the time to acknowledge how hard it was and how things have changed and how things have not changed. So what we are always hoping to do is make sure we showcase and highlight those very special things about planners and people and who have really struggled to be amazing and successful planners, people who maybe don't even think that they're doing amazing work, but really are, and people who you don't really think struggled, but really did. And so those are the things that we really want to make sure we highlight as planners, as not just a profession, but just as fellow humans. We are going to continue to showcase and highlight our planners in every possible way we can, but this is just one really easy way to just remember that there are lots and lots of phenomenal planners in our midst. So thank you, and I'm so excited to be on this. I was excited to be on this panel with 3 of them. So appreciate all of that. A reminder, again, we will have the recordings shared with you all, and also the details, and remind you of the details for AICP credits. You can account for that. And please stay apprised of any of the other things that we have coming up. We're really looking forward to seeing you and doing more of this. So with that, we're going to sign off. Thank you so much. And then we're going to end the recording. If the panelists can just stay on for just a little bit, that would be great. Thank you all. Have a good day. Appreciate it.